Ju përshëndes nga studio emisionit intervju. Këtë pasdite me mua në studio është zoti Michael Granoff, i cili është drejtues ekzekutiv i Fondit Shqiptaro-Amerikan të Zhvillimit. Mirë se erdhët, shumë kënaqësi që ju kam në studio.
Thank you, Marilla. It's a pleasure for me to be able to be here with you again and continue our conversation.
Po, është era e tretë që bisedojmë së bashku në fakt, dhe unë do ta nis me një emër që thot shumë në përpjekjet tuaja, ne do të flasim edhe për projektet tuaja të tjera, por unë do ta nis me Butrintin. Butrinti, i cili është një element shumë i ndjeshëm për ata që njohin historinë e Shqipërisë, që janë të ndjeshëm për kulturën, për trashëgiminë në këtë vend, që janë të vetëdijshëm se çfarë thesari është Butrinti, por edhe për ata që ndoshta nuk i dinë të gjitha këto vlera që unë sapo përmenda. Ju keni luftuar për Butrintin, unë mund ta them këtë, me gojën plot kur thon shqiptarët, pra mund ta them me të vërtetën si drita e diellit. Përse kjo lidhje fort me Butrintin?
So it's a really interesting question because there are a number of strings that in a way attach me and attach the foundation to Butrint. One is that it's one of the first things in Albania I ever learned about. So when I first learned about Albania over 30 years ago, I met with a friend of mine, Lord Rothschild, and Lord Rothschild, I wanted to talk about business, and Lord Rothschild wanted to talk about Albania and wanted to talk about Butrint, because he had this house in Corfu and he could overlook Butrint, and he had first gotten involved with the Butrint Foundation that many years ago to try to think about how to protect it and sustain it in that way. So my experience with Butrint goes back a long time. It goes back as long as my experience in Albania goes back. The second thing is that obviously Butrint itself in some ways is it's a measure of the past, the present, and the future of the country. You know, it goes back hundreds, maybe thousands of years of history. And I think it's an important thing for Albanians to learn about their history, an important thing for other people to learn about Albania's history. The third thing is that, honestly, Butrint was neglected for a long time, and neglected in every way you can think about. Everything from the stones were crumbling and the bathrooms didn't work and there was trash around, but also because there was a lot of corruption. Ticket prices didn't reflect what people were paying.
Yeah.
And as a result, Butrint was a neglected place, a dusty jewel, let's say, in that kind of way. So it needed help. And so our approach to Butrint was to try to be comprehensive about it, that we needed to establish maybe a different structure of how to manage it and how to sustain it and how to develop it in a way that would protect it from future generations. And that's not an easy thing to do in any major cultural kind of site. And so we worked hard to design a structure to do that so that we could manage all of those things together with the government at its head. So controlled by the government. The chairman of the Butrint Management Foundation is the Minister of Culture. And now we're really beginning to see those results in that way. Now, the other reason that Butrint is important is that tourism, as you know, is rising, not just incrementally, but dramatically in this country. People visiting this country, either the Albanian diaspora, Albanians visiting other parts of their country, or certainly foreign tourists. I think part of what we want to do and what Albania should want to do is to educate people about the country. What is this place about? And so we have an opportunity with Butrint to do that, and to do that for a broader and broader audience. So your question is maybe a bigger question than you thought, because it has all of these different strings and attachments to it of why it's important and why we can make a difference.
Qartë, po flisni ka gjatë për Butrintin dhe unë do t'ju pyes për Shqipërinë, dhe kush e di sa gjatë do flisni tani kur unë t'ju pyes që kur keni dëgjuar për herë të parë për Shqipërinë dhe cila është lidhja juaj e vërtet me Shqipërinë gjatë këtyre viteve?
So I have to tell you that when I was introduced to Albania, I didn't know anything about it. And people often ask me, my Albanian background, did I visit it before? Did I know something before? And I have to tell you that I did not. And so what happened is that after communism ended, the United States government decided to try to develop the private sector in all of the formerly communist countries, and decided to do that by setting up private equity funds, essentially, in all of the formerly communist countries, beginning with Poland, actually. And the way that it would work was that the President of the United States would appoint the board of these funds, and then they would try to go and invest and develop the private sector. And I was asked whether I was interested in being a board member because I had worked for President Clinton when he became president, and so we knew each other pretty well. And one day they called me and asked me whether I would work on the one for Albania. And the reason the president wanted me to work on it was, at the time, he said, well, it's actually the hardest one. Albania is the poorest country in Europe today. I think it will be the most difficult one to work on, and that's why I want you to do it. And at that point, I had to look and see where Albania was on a map. I didn't know anything about the country, and so I had to get educated fast. And then over these last 30 years has been quite an education for me.
Kur keni ardhur për herë të parë në Shqipëri?
1995.
Pra, në vitin 1995, dhe cili ishte impresioni i parë, përshtypja e parë kur pat Tiranën?
You know, it's interesting. I noticed two things that in some ways are a little bit contradictory. On the one hand, you could see how primitive Albania was. There was only one hotel I could stay on. There were very few cars. My hotel room looked out over Skanderbeg Square, and when you looked out over Skanderbeg Square, you saw a car every 4 or 5 minutes, one car. There was only really one restaurant that Westerners could eat at. There were goats and sheep in the road as we drove from the airport. The airport itself was left over from the communist era and did not look like the airports that we're used to. So you were struck immediately by the primitive nature of things here. Let's say the primitive nature of the infrastructure. But the contrast to it was that people were incredibly open, incredibly welcoming, incredibly grateful for the help of the United States, incredibly pro-American, and that contrast struck me from the very beginning. And it wasn't obvious in the sense that Albania is far away from the United States. It never trade. Even today, there's very little trade between the United States and Albania. There's not a lot of natural reason why geography is far away. Not a lot of reason why that would be the case. And so I was struck by that contradiction in a way between the primitive nature of the infrastructure and the very advanced nature in a way, or the natural desire for Albanians after so many years of communism to kind of join the world.
E kuptoj. Dhe në fakt fondi juaj ka projekte në zhvillim aktualisht me vlerë mbi $93 milion në teknologji, në arsim, në sipërmarrje, kulturë. Angazhimi total deri më tani kalon $147 milion në 85 projekte. Duhet I lexoj këto shifra se janë shumë të mëdha dhe nuk duhet gabojmë te këto miliona dollar, se duken si pak, por janë $147 milion në 85 projekte. Ju besoni që këto investime kanë sjellë ndryshim në Shqipëri gjatë këtyre viteve?
So your question is a very interesting one, and the reason it's so interesting is that it goes to the heart of what I think our strategy or approach has been, which is there's no shortage of good intentions in the world. There are a lot of organizations here and everywhere that have very good intentions to try to improve things. But there are very, very few that can execute, right? And ultimately, it's not about good intentions, it's about good results. It's about what you actually do.
Sure.
And so from the very beginning, we concentrated on the execution side of things. So when you ask, did we make a difference? Well, we know we've made a big difference because we've concentrated so seriously on the execution side of it. Now, the whole question of impact when it comes to philanthropic kinds of projects is a very interesting area because it's not the same as a for-profit company where you just look at, okay, here are my revenues and here are my profits, and I can measure it in this very linear kind of way. And so there are projects that we have where you can look at the results very clearly. So when we redeveloped the Bazari in Tirana, you can go there and you can see here's what it looked like before.
Shikojmë, është pazari Korçës, është pazari I Gjirokastrës.
And you can see Gjirokastra, Korça. So these places you can see sort of before and after pictures, very easy to see. In contrast, things like educational programs, we can see how many kids we educate. We can see the programs that we're offering to them, but it's going to take us a long time to see the result of that, years and years and years. But it's a little bit like planting a tree. You know, if a tree is going to take 20 years to ripen, age, well, you better plant it today. And that's been our approach to things. So I think we've been able to have a very strong impact on things that we measure in every way we can, understanding that some of the projects, the impact can be measured very clearly and very quickly, and other projects, maybe even that have more impact in the end, will take a while for us to be able to measure, and we can measure them in different kinds of ways. And I'll just give you an example of one that takes a little bit longer, and that's junior achievement. So junior achievement is an economic education program that is all over the world. I think it's offered in 150 countries, something like that. So been in existence a long time. And we brought it to Albania and tried to see how we could educate kids a little bit more about how the economy works and their role in the economy. In most of these 150 countries, maybe 10%, maybe 20%, maybe 30% of kids get a chance to participate in it. And we thought, going to your question of impact, right? How do we offer this to every Albanian kid, right? Not just kids in Tirana, not just kids who are wealthy, not just kids who come from a privileged background, but how do we offer it to everybody? And the key was we had a program that we could prove that could work, that we could execute. And by working with government, in this case, we were able to make it part of the curriculum. So today, it's offered to 100% of the kids in this country. Well, it turns out that there's not another country in the world that has a 100% penetration rate on junior achievement. So it's not just that we took this program and brought it to Albania, but actually we made it better in a way. And now people from junior achievement are coming to Albania to see what we've been able to do, to say, gee, how did you do that?
E qartë. Natyrisht që këto janë produkte dhe rezultate shumë të mira të cilat preken me dorë dhe shikohen, por që nga viti 95 që ju keni ardhur, jemi vitin 2025, sa e vështirë është bësh filantropi në Shqipëri, me ato karakteristika që thatë. Ne ishim një vend i sapo dal nga komunizmi, në shumë aspekte vërtet primitiv. Nga ana tjetër një karakter për cilin do flasim pak më vonë, një karakter tipik, atipik ndoshta shpeshherë. Si ka mundësi që arrini dhe keni patur një sukses për 3 dekada në këtë vend?
So, you know, it's interesting. Philanthropy is a topic that's not well understood in a lot of places, and it's not just in Albania. It's actually most understood in the United States, it turns out, and it's not well understood in Europe, it's not well understood in Asia. This idea that people give money and don't expect anything in return or get anything in return is not such an easy concept for people to understand. And so you're right, sometimes people still ask, well, you give all of this money in Butrint or you give all this money in education, what do you get? And when you tell them nothing, you know, their reaction is, well, you have to get something, right? And our answer is what we get is satisfaction that we've made this difference, that we've improved the country. That's why we're here. To do this. And that idea is not so well understood here, but it's not an Albanian question so much as it is a broader question. It's not so well understood in Europe, it's not so well understood in Asia, and so there's sort of this education process there too of people over time understanding that in fact we today are in the business of giving money away. That's our business. Right now, we want to do it well. We want to do it, as your question was, to have maximum kind of impact. So we want to measure it in that kind of way. But that's our job. And the return on investment that we get is the change that we create.
Në fakt, janë 3 njerëz të cilët kanë një karrierë të stabilizuar në Shqipëri dhe unë kam 27 vjet gazetare dhe mbaj mend vetëm 3 emra që nuk kanë ikur nga puna e tyre. Është Sali Berisha, Edi Rama dhe ju, zoti Granoff.
Yeah, well, I worked with both of them, for sure. And the reason is that a couple of things. One is that our role, our job from the beginning is to be above politics, that what we're doing should be in the interest of the country. And if we were going to do that, we should work with all political parties. And as long as what they were doing was supportive of our efforts, then we should be happy to work with them. It turns out that because of those kinds of partnerships, like in the example I gave you with Junior Achievement, we've been able to do bigger things. We've been able to accomplish things with bigger scale because of it. And you're right, showing up is a lot, and together we've been around for decades trying to do things to improve the country in that way. I have to tell you, that example of the three of us together, no one's ever given me that one before, so that's a new one to think about. But it's true, we've been here working on these things, and in some ways working on these things together for a very long time.
E qartë, ju tashmë jeni shqiptar. Cila është ajo karakteristik apo ai virtyti shqiptarëve që ju e vlerësoni më shumë? Një element.
You know, it's interesting because you asked me the question of what I found when I came here. And those, I think the traits of Albanians that I found when I came here remained, that they weren't just a post-communism reaction. They were sort of the natural reactions, the natural instincts of people here. So people very welcoming, very open to new ideas, wanting to improve their life, wanting to work at it, improve the lives of their children, curious about the world, I would say intellectually curious about lots of different things. And that made it, we didn't have to work hard in a way to work together, that in the sense that people were not resistant to working with us. They were open to working with us. Now, we needed to educate them, and we needed to work together, and we needed to understand the local environment and all of those kinds of things. You know, it doesn't happen in a minute, right? But I think those essential elements of the nature of Albanians contributed to what we were able to do. Now, you can see it not just in the context of our foundation, right? You can see it in EU accession. You can see it in becoming a part of NATO. You know, who would have imagined that Albania would be a NATO country, right? You could even see it last year when Albania was part of the UN Security Council, right? You know, little Albania sat on the Security Council, played a role that maybe people didn't think it would, in being able to work with all of these countries in this way, in a very constructive way. And part of the reason was just the nature or the approach of Albanians to these kinds of things.
E kuptoj. Megjithatë, ka ndonjë element që ju ende nuk ju a kuptoni dot shqiptarëve. Nuk kuptoni pse janë të tillë. Diçka, një tipar.
You know, I think that Albanians, it's not unique to Albanians, but a lot of times we think our problems are unique to us. And so when someone will say to me, well, you know, this is an Albanian problem, all right? Yes, I understand, this is an Albanian thing. And what I tell them, and it's very rarely true. So most of the issues, most of the things that people deal with are not unique to Albania. They occur in other places in the world, they occur to other people like them, and it's true of problems in life in general. You know, we think our problems are unique to us, and some of them are, but most of them are not. And so I think that Albanians often think, because of their history, right, that these are Albanian problems unique to us in this way because of our experiences. And I think, in fact, most of the time they're not, and they are linked to a communist past. They're linked to economic development. They're linked to integration. They're linked to immigration. They're linked to a lot of other things that other countries are experiencing at the same time. But we feel it as individuals, kind of strongly to us, and Albanians feel it strongly, saying, it's about us.
E qartë. Mirë, ne do të shkojmë në një hapësirë publicitare shumë të shkurtër, do kthehemi pas pak dhe do të shohim zotin Granoff në një perspektivë tjetër, në një perspektivë më njerëzore pas publicitetit. Kthehem në bisedë me zotin Granoff, jam kurioze të ditë 30 vjet me Shqipërinë. Familja juaj si e ka parë këtë rrugtimin tuaj, këtë punë që keni në Shqipëri, se ju jetoni në Shtetet e Bashkuara?
Well, my kids were little when I first started coming to Albania, and now they're all grown up. And so they've been here a couple of times, and so in a way they've lived it with me in this way. And, they discovered Albania the way that I did. We had to look on a map and see where it was. And now they have, my kids have met most Albanian presidents and most Albanian prime ministers and have been here. And so it's become a part of their life in that way too, just because it's been such a big part of mine. But I think the interesting thing about it is that for them, for my family, it's been an opportunity to learn something that they probably wouldn't have learned about otherwise, that maybe other kids and other people didn't have the same experiences about. And so it broadened them to think about a place maybe they wouldn't have gone to otherwise, meet people they wouldn't have met otherwise, adapt in that way. And so in a way, my experience here has been a little bit of a gift to them, I think, which they understand, which they feel.
Ju a ka pasuruar jetën në një farë mënyrë, sepse ishte një gjë krejtësisht e ndryshme nga...
I think it has, Marella. Yeah, I think it has. And I think if you, they probably aren't so interested in being interviewed on TV this way, but it would make them a little nervous. But I think if you ask them, that's what they would say, that it contributed something to their life, and also something that not all the other kids were experiencing. So something different for them.
E qartë. Zoti Granoff, ju e doni Shqipërinë. Pse e doni Shqipërinë? Ka shqiptarë që thonë, pse lindëm këtu, të kishim lindur në vend tjetër. Unë kam jetuar jashtë, për fat ka edhe njerëz që si u mësojnë gjuhën shqipe fëmijëve të tyre, thonë duam të fillojmë një jetë re këtej, nuk dua lidhje më me Shqipërinë. Pra, Shqipëria është një vend që nuk të ofron vetëm mundësira, është i vështirë, kemi ato problemet tona, që dhe ju i dini ndoshta më mirë se sa unë, por ju prapë doni Shqipërinë, pavarësisht se e kam parasysh, mendoj që nuk ka qenë shumë e thjeshtë të arrini të konkludoni të gjitha projektet tuaja me kaq lehtësi. Prapë doni Shqipërinë, pse e doni Shqipërinë?
Well, it's not easy to get things done anywhere. It's as I told you, execution is hard. Execution is rare. And so it's not like you go to the Garden of Eden and it's easy, right? So the challenge part of it, well, one is I like challenges. And so I'm kind of not deterred by them. The second is that the opportunity to change things was unique. Right? The reality is that this country has changed in a dramatic way in a very short period of time. It doesn't mean that the country doesn't face significant problems. It does.
Sure.
It doesn't mean that the country doesn't face significant challenges, that people are unhappy about the direction of things in many ways. All of that's true. But at the same time, it is absolutely true that the country has changed in dramatic ways, certainly since I started coming. Most of those ways, good for people. That is that people live today in a way that is much better than they lived, for the most part, when I first started coming 30 years ago. So life has improved for the most part. And so being able to be a part of that change, even in a small way, which is what we've done, you don't often get the chance to do that, right? You don't often get the chance to do things where, in some ways, you can answer your question and say, did you have some impact? Did you change things in a way? And you can say, well, yeah, we were able to change things. Can we change the direction of the country? Of course not. Can we push change in our own incremental way? Yes, and most people don't get a chance to do it.
E qartë, po ashtu sikur se ju thash, ju jeni njëri që e njeni shumë mirë politikën në këtë vend, aktorët politik të gjithë. Por në Shqipëria është një moment ku njerëzit duan të ikin, të dhënat e instatit, por jo vetëm të dhënat e instatit, biseda formale, po jo formale, me miq Ne dëgjojmë shpeshherë fjalin që fëmijët të shkojnë në klasë të 9, të mbarojë për atë high schoolin që dhe të shkojnë me studime, le të bëjë një universitet jashtë dhe besoj të themeloj jetën atje. Pra nuk është më ai emigracioni dikurshëm për të gjetur një punë jashtë, për të sjellë lek në shtëpi dhe për të investuar këtu. Ka filluar një emigracion i brezit të ri dhe i njerëzve potenciali, tregu të punës, të ikim nga ky vend sepse këtu nuk ka siguri. E para si e shikoni ju këtë moment dhe dyta, çfarë do t'ju thoshit këtyre njerëzve që për një arsye ose për një tjetër vendosin t'ikin, mërziten, lodhen, nuk ja vlen më mirë punoj një punë të rëndom të andej, po jam më i qetë, ndoshta. Si do t'i thoshe një shqiptarit të tillë?
So, the first thing that we all have to accept, Mirella, is that emigration is one of the biggest problems facing this country, right? The numbers are inescapable, right? And so if you had to rank the challenges to the country, this has to rank pretty high. Right? So you have to start there and acknowledge the issues as they exist. Happening for a lot of reasons, true of many countries in the Balkans maybe, and not just true of Albania alone, but clearly a major challenge. And so if you were in a position of leadership in this country, and you had 4 or 5 things that you really wanted to pay attention to, well, this had to be one of them, right? The national interest of the country is in, brain gain, not brain drain, and keeping as many people here as possible. But the key is people need to see that they're going to have opportunity. They need to see economic opportunity. They need to see that their children can have a better life than they can.
Sure.
They need to see those opportunities because we now live in a world that is a lot more mobile, right? We now live in a world where people can move around a lot more easily than they could move around 20 or 30 years ago in that way. And so people can make choices about their life. In English, you would say they vote with their feet, right? People can vote with their feet today. And so, that's something that government and institutions need to be very conscious of and do whatever they can to try to reverse this trend and have people come back. Now, while our foundation is not going to solve this problem, at the same time, that consideration actually fits into a lot of the things that we do. That is one of the reasons that we pay so much attention to educational programs. One of the reasons that we pay so much attention to technology, bringing technology here, is because it has the potential to break down barriers. It has the potential to transcend geography and create opportunities anywhere. You don't need to be in Silicon Valley to do things in technology. You can be right here in Tirana. Right now, yesterday, I spoke at Plug and Play, this program that we have, and there are now 22 new startups in Albania. Well, they're not in California. They're here. And so what we've tried to do in a lot of these programs is say, well, will they make the environment more conducive to people staying here? Right? Will they create more opportunity for people to meet their, let's say, their career goals, their economic goals by staying here than having to leave to do that? Because I think a lot of people, their families and their social life, and they're not looking to leave for that reason, but they may be looking to leave for economic reasons and educational reasons and all of that. And so we're trying to at least be, again, I am not under an illusion that we're going to be able to flip a switch, and we're not. We can't solve this problem, but we can certainly be more of a part of the solution than a part of the problem. And a lot of our programs are designed to be part of the solution, I think.
E kuptoj. Besoni në Zot?
I do believe in God, but I would tell you that I think, I forget who said it, maybe President Kennedy said, here on earth, God's work must be our own.
Nëse do takoni të veten tuaj 20 vjeç, çfarë do t'i thoshit?
Don't worry so much. And this journey is going to be a lot different than you ever thought it would be.
Keni qenë i shqetësuar në atë moshë, si do jetë, me ato ëndra të tjera, perspektivat ndryshme, apo?
Yeah, my life, some people's life tends to be more linear or unidimensional. So, for example, many people, I worked in our government, have worked in the private sector, most people who work in government stay in government, and I didn't do that. Most people who run businesses like mine, that's all they've done, and they have a very kind of unidimensional, linear career. They went to business school, they worked for this company, they did this, and my life has been more circuitous, let's say, in that way, which has been a good thing, but is a different thing than most people. I'll tell you, it's interesting. Our company was the subject of a Harvard Business School case study many years ago, and the students are not just interested in the company, but they're kind of interested in you. Like, so how did you get from here to there? And I had to start by telling them, well, you can't really try to copy my life, because my life has taken a lot of twists and turns. Now, I've tried to do things, follow my passions, do things that I cared about, be tenacious about it, stick to it. So you could adopt some of those qualities or try to think about those qualities, but you really had to trace your own path, because trying to trace my path was unlikely to get you to where you kind of wanted to be.
Të qartë. Nëse do takonit veten tuaj 85 vjeç sot, çfarë do t'i thoshit?
Well, first, as I'd like to meet myself when I'm 85 and recognize myself, so that would be good. And I think probably you'd like to be surrounded by your children and grandchildren and be telling them all of these stories. And you'd like them to think, and people around you to think, that you push things in a good direction. You made a positive difference. Being on Earth for your 85 years mattered in this way, and maybe made it easier or better for people in the next 85 years. And I think if you could meet yourself when you're 85 and feel comfortable with that, that would be a pretty good thing. I hope I can meet myself when I'm 85.
Të gjitha shpresojmë këtë moment. Keni ndonjë peng në jetën tuaj, ndonjë pendes?
Merle, I recently read this book about wealth, and it was trying to separate not just financial wealth, but what are the other kinds of wealth? So we have relationship wealth and community and all these things. And one of the forms of wealth is time. And what the book was saying was that when you're 20 years old or 25 years old, you're a billionaire when it comes to time, in the sense that you have a billion seconds or a billion minutes left in your life. You're a billionaire. And how are you going to use that billionaire status, right? How are you going to use that billion? And so I think you always think a little bit about time. Time is short. How do you use your time in that way?
Okay.
And so I don't have regrets about things that I've done in my life so much, but could you have used your time, not used your time better, but been more conscious of time in a way? When I was 20 or 25, I didn't think I was a billionaire, right? And you probably didn't either.
Asnjë nga ne nuk e ka menduar.
Nobody does. But it's probably not a bad lesson to teach people to say, by the way, you are. There's a time when you're a billionaire, and just like a billionaire in wealth, thinking about, well, okay, now how am I going to think about this wealth and what am I going to do with it? Maybe we should all think about the wealth of time that we have and be careful about it.
E qartë. Cili është momenti më krenar i jetës tuaj? Një moment që ju bën të jeni shumë i lumtur që e keni jetuar apo që keni konkluduar, diçka që vërtet ndjeni mirë?
Merle, it's an interesting question, because I was thinking about it, and most of the times or events that I was proud of were often because of someone else, not necessarily because of me or just me. So I was a very proud father. It was probably more about their mother than about me, right? So it was a very proud moment for me, of course, and yet it was maybe even more about their mother. I was very proud to receive awards here for this work that we've done, Mother Teresa and Skanderberg and all of that. But most of our work here is not work that I did directly. I was involved in it. I was overseeing it, but the work was done by the team here. And so as I was thinking about this question about what are you the most proud of, it's probably things where other people maybe were more responsible for it, or they were the part of it than I was. Maybe I was involved in it, maybe I led it in some way, but the linkage was always to others somehow. And I hadn't really thought about the question, that way before until I saw what you were going to ask.
Fjalë shqip dini?
Okay, so I'll tell you, I have to tell you this secret since we're being honest with each other. When I first came to Albania and I had to give one of my first speeches, I decided I would try to say something in Albanian. And I was trying to use this famous line from President Kennedy's speech in Berlin, where he said, Ich bin ein Berliner. We're all Berliners, trying to get people to think that. And so I wanted to say, we are all Albanians. Because to get people to think about, yes, we're all in this together, right? And so someone wrote it out for me, and I said it at the beginning of the speech. And everybody clapped very appreciatively of it. And afterwards, someone came up to me and they said to me, Michael, it was a good speech, but what you really said was, we are all Albanian women. And so from that point on, I thought it would be easier to be translated.
Pra, normalisht ka thënë jemi të gjithë shqiptare, jo shqiptarë. E kuptoj, është pak e vështirë dhe...
Yeah, but sometimes one letter matters.
Dhe që nga ky moment nuk mendove më që të flisja shqip, po fjalë kështu tek tuk di, apo jo? Disa fjalë.
I thought about it, and I can understand people often, but I was a little more careful about it from that point on.
E kuptoj. Kështu që miropafshim do ta them vetëm unë në shqip. Mund ta thuash miropafshim në shqip, apo?
Miropafshim.
Miropafshim. Miq, unë ju falenderoj shumë për këtë intervistë. Vërtet ishte ndër intervistat shumë të vërteta dhe sinqerta. Faleminderit që ishit me ne. Miq, të takojmë të dielën e ardhshme. Miropafshim.